I can understand the voices on the other side of this committee who would say, please don't look at the video. This is not about the video. We don't want to talk about the acts in the video, kind of like the Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the man moving those levers behind there. What I cannot understand is that those same voices cannot say that there is no act that's too far. There's no act that's too brutal. There's no act that's not acceptable, even for Planned Parenthood. And they want to talk about dollars. Ms. Odom, if you're correct on the number of abortions, even though they don't report these numbers, based on the best evidence we had, you're talking about $147 million for abortions last year that went at big dollars. And what just startles me is when I hear Mrs. Smith say, and I want to read this again. This is Justice Kennedy's, what the chairman stated. This is Justice Kennedy's statements, not mine. He says this, he said, he described at length the testimony provided by abortionist Leroy Carhart about the alternate D&E method or dismemberment procedure. This is what he said in court. And Mrs. Smith doesn't say that's wrong. She doesn't say that's inaccurate. Here's what it says. The fetus can be alive at the beginning of the dismemberment process and can survive for a time while its limbs are being torn off. Dr. Carhart agreed that when you pull out a piece of the fetus, let's say an arm or leg, and remove that at the time just prior to the removal of the portion of the fetus is alive. Dr. Carhart has observed fetal heartbeat via ultrasound with extensive parts of the fetus removed and testified that mere dismemberment of a limb does not always cause death because he knows of a physician who removed the arm of a fetus only to have the fetus go on to be born as a living child with one arm. At the conclusion of a D&E abortion, no intact fetus remains. In Dr. Carhart's words, the abortionist is left with a tray full of pieces. And then Justice Kennedy goes on, in a Supreme Court case, the fetus in many cases dies just as a human adult or child would. It bleeds to death as it is torn limb from limb. And to say that you support a woman's right to choose is one thing. To say that you might want to give health care to people is another thing. But for anybody to say that procedure and what you just described is humane, that doesn't go too far, that's not too brutal, that is humane and acceptable, just defies my imagination. I couldn't imagine that happening to one of my pets, much less a unborn child. And then when I look, Mrs. Smith, I know you state that you're with, you're Associate Research Scholar in Law and Senior Fellow and Director for a Program for the Study of Reproductive Justice at Yale Law School, and I know you're here in your own personal capacity today. But I just wonder, does Yale have any study for the rights of individuals like Mrs. Jessen or Miss Odom to be born without cerebral palsy? Because there was a lot of questions when Mr. Sensenbrenner was raising those issues a while ago that are apparently unanswered. Are there any such studies up there that would dare suggest the right of one of these children not to be born with one arm? And Mr. Chairman, that's what just baffles me about this, not that we have disagreements, but that none of those voices that cry out, don't look at this act, don't look at this act, can find no point that's too far, no point that's too brutal, no point that's inhumane, and then they dare suggest that we are extreme. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I just thank you for this hearing, and for our witnesses coming here today, thank you for being here, and I yield back.